Okay. Let's see if that works. Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to SerenityOS office hours. If you can hear and see me, please let me know. But usually it works. I always feel like it's not going to work this time. All right, we got some small sign of life here. I'm just going to assume that's a yes. All right, perfect. Hello. Welcome back, everybody. It's Friday. It's 4 p.m. Swedish time, and we are doing what we always do, where we talk about SerenityOS and take technical and non-technical questions about whatever we want to talk about. So I'm in a little bit worse shape than usual today because I had to get up at 4:30 in the morning to drive a family to the train station. So a little bit, everything's a little bit hazy and slow, but it's probably going to be okay. So if anybody has SerenityOS questions, this is your time. I will happily dive into anything. And the thing that I worked on this week, as many people already watched the video I made about it, but the new Maine signature of Serenity programs is the Serenity Maine thing. And since I made the video about it, I've also been expanding its use, and also a bunch of people have helped out in expanding its use. So I did, for example, the help GUI program, so the help browser. I've made it use the same concept for not just doing system calls, but also for GUI setup. So as you can see here, we now try GUI window creation, GUI layout setup, widget allocation, stuff like that. And it's like, it feels strange in many places, but it's also very interesting to dive into this and see what we can make of it, because we're sort of coming from a model of assuming that everything always just succeeds allocation-wise. And as I talked about with Brian in the developer interview I did with him last weekend, it would be interesting to see if we can make user space a lot more paranoid about allocation failures as well. So this is sort of dipping our toes into that stuff. So this is what it might look like, right? So instead of just set main widget, you now do a try to set the main widget, and this will then propagate it in a failure if allocation doesn't succeed. So I have a good and bad feelings about it, right? You do get, it gets very spammy with this try everywhere, but at the same time, I feel like it is very nice because you get these big markers everywhere where something might go wrong. So what this thing really communicates is that, like, here's a potential failure point, right? So I do like that aspect of it, but some people have asked about the difference between this and like old school C++ exceptions, and I think the strong visual indication is what I really like about it, that it really shows you exactly where things can go wrong, which has always been my problem with standard exceptions, that you sort of have this block of code, but there's no indication which thing might fail. It's just something within here could fail, within this block. Anyway, that's just a note about that. Let's see. Okay, so Jefferson has been waiting for this live stream all week. Well, that's gives me something to live up to. So thank you for saying that. Abhishek says, happy belated Thanksgiving. Hope you're doing fine along with your family. Indeed, I am doing fine. And my family is doing fine as well. We don't necessarily celebrate Thanksgiving in Sweden, but that's not to say that we can't just feel thankful for things, even though it's not an official holiday. And I certainly feel thankful for many things. Ali says, and you know that it doesn't magically allocate. Right, yeah. So that's definitely a huge benefit of these value-based exceptions, or whatever you want to call these, that there's no magic, really. There's no magic allocations, there's no magic unwind. It's really like, once you understand what the macro does, then you know the whole trick. Like, you know everything that's going on. Gary Moore says, hope you're having a good week. Question, can you use the WASM module to run binary apps from the command line interface? Kind of like WASM time or WASMer. Would be neat to have portable binaries. I don't know the answer to that, but Ali is here, who wrote the WASM module, or at least the majority of it, so I'm sure that he could answer it. I agree that it would be kind of neat to have portable binaries, but I don't know about the mechanics of how that would work at the moment. Coding Genesis says, I like that thought a lot, although it's ultimately still up to the programmer to handle those potential fails. Right, yes. Of course, in this case here, all you need to do to if you want to, the easiest thing you can do to handle the try failure is just to change your return type. If your return type is error or something, then basically you're free to use try, and it will just propagate the error to your caller. But obviously, at some level, the caller has to deal with it. So some caller has to actually sort of unwrap the error, look at it, and decide to do something. And in our case, it's like in this case right here, it's whoever calls Serenity Maine, right? So that would be the libmain main function. So this guy right here who calls Serenity Maine, he actually has to go and inspect the result. And there's also situations where you don't want to propagate an error all the way up the stack and like return from main and effectively exit the program. So, and this is something that kind of excites me about this work, is that it will ultimately make us able to do things like, say that you try to open a really large image in Pixel Paint. Instead of exiting the whole program, it's pretty cool if we can say, sorry, I don't have enough memory to open this file. And then sort of gracefully fail out of the attempt to open it. It's going to take a lot of work to get to that point where that just magically works, but I think it's an interesting thing to aim for. And a lot of software is not written in a way that supports that kind of thing, so it is interesting to pursue. Let's see. So Brian says, isn't it kind of redundant to have try and then try add? Shouldn't you remove try from the method names if you have try at the start of the line? Yes, the try prefixes are temporary. So in the Serenity codebase, we're always doing continuous refactoring and incremental refactoring. And when you do incremental refactoring, you kind of you have to, or to make it easier for yourself, what you do is you pick a new name for something as you're implementing it while keeping everything else working. So until we have propagated this pattern everywhere, we can just call this try create, right? But once everybody is doing try create, we can just drop the try. But it's just easier when you're adding something new to use a unique new name for it, instead of like changing all the old code to a new name and then changing all that once again to something. At least that has always been my intuition about this sort of thing, that it's just easier to change things incrementally and then give everybody the final name. let's see. Eliter Roger says, hi Andreas, Autom is not good in OS development. What do you think about this? I don't understand the problem. What's wrong with Autom equals? It's just type inference. It's I don't know what you think it does, but it doesn't. There's nothing wrong with using auto in OS development. Let's see. ZR0 says, has working on Serenity changed your approach to certain programming concepts / design patterns? Yes, absolutely. It definitely has, and it continues to do so. And I think that's a very nice thing. I mean, the thing I've just been talking about is a great example of that, right? It's a completely new approach. I haven't used this approach for programming before. And we're sort of seeing new patterns emerge as we go to try to figure out like how to make the best software for the platform. And I think when I started working on Serenity, I was a lot more confident that in thinking that what I wanted to do at the time was exactly what it should be. Or sort of, I thought that I had a clearer vision of how the code should look. But over time, as I expanded the system and as more and more people worked on it, we discovered that there are much better ways of doing things. And this is like a natural progression, of course. Like you work on something, you discover better ways of doing it. But it is funny and it's kind of humbling in a way to find that your original assumptions were very far from where you want to go today. Let's see. Radiant Mango says, I thought your last video about a better Maine was so interesting and not something I had thought about. How has the feedback from it been? People have been very positive about it. I got a lot of messages from people saying that it never occurred to them that you could just change to a different type of main function. And I've also had a lot of people joining in to help out in porting more code to the new patterns. So that's been really great. Jared says, does SerenityOS have an IPv6 client? No, it does not. There's very little IPv6 stuff. There's some like structure definitions in the standard C library and stuff like that. Just to support some ports that require IPv6 structs just to compile, but we don't actually have any kind of IPv6 support to back that up. It's just structure definitions. Let's see. Eliter says, you have all variables as auto. It is not clear what is being returned. It is perfectly clear what is being returned if you are familiar with the code base. And then he says that the OS is filled with classes that should not have been classes in reality, also in my opinion. What are your thoughts on this? I don't know. Like the no hate, happy birthday, by the way. My birthday was a long time ago. My thoughts on this, I don't know. This is sort of really lazy criticism without examples. So I don't know. I don't have any thoughts on that. But people who work on the system have absolutely no problem understanding what is being returned. So I tend to think that it works perfectly fine because hundreds of people are able to be productive with it. If you have some example of something and you are an active developer, then of course I would care about your opinion. But if you don't give any examples, even it's hard to have an opinion. Let's see. Vesna says, do you agree with me that it's very stupid to think what others who live their lives, make their mistakes, and have never been with you when it was hard for you and in your head think about you? I don't know that it is. I don't know that it's stupid to think about what other people think about you. I think it's very natural. We think about what other people think of us because we are social creatures, right? Um, but I do think that it's pretty unproductive. Um, you can dump a whole lot of energy into worrying about what other people think about you. Certainly, I've done that. I've dumped endless amounts of energy into worrying about other people's opinions, but at the same time, the the people that you do care about, like, um, it really does matter what they think about you. So I don't know if there's one universal straight answer to, like, should you or should you not care about what people think about you. Of course, you mentioned like the people who were not there with you when you had a hard time. I don't know. If I think about myself, basically almost all of the people I speak to on a daily basis today, I did not know them when I was having a hard time. Um, I know them, like, I've gotten to know people after I got out of my hard times and after I started building the Serenity project, and it would be it wouldn't be right to say that I don't care what they think about me. Like, obviously I care what people think about me. I try to do what's right and try to be a good friend, but um, hmm. I don't know. I don't know how to answer this. I guess I don't want to I don't want to waste my energy on what people think about me if it's negative. Um, I don't mind thinking about people if it's positive. Hmm. I have to think more about this. I think I feel like I'm struggling to visualize a coherent thought about this. But thank you for the question. It's interesting. It caught me a little off guard. Let's see. Mustafa says, "Have you worked with a small talk before?" Um, no, I haven't. I have not done anything with small talk, but probably I definitely want to check out more languages and more of the sort of historical object-oriented languages, just to learn more about the history of the paradigm and stuff like that. But it's yet another one of those things that goes into my big pile of stuff I want to investigate. Let's see. Nullsfix says, maybe it's just my internet, but I am experiencing extreme latency. Let me just double check that I set it to low latency here. Yeah, I set it to ultra low latency. So that's the best I can offer. YouTube doesn't give me any better settings. And my bandwidth, as far as I know, is very good. Upload is good. So I'm sorry that you're seeing latency. Let's see. Davi says, this is not strictly related to SerenityOS, but how would you organize a program with a very large initialization body in the main function? Generally speaking, I feel that the more stuff you move out of the main function, the nicer it tends to become. And if you have like a large initialization body in main, even just moving that to a separate function so that you get a smaller main, even that can feel like an improvement, I think, very often. And actually, like, we have a lot of things in Serenity where we do a bunch of things in the main function, and the more I look at those, the less I like them. Like, even this one we're looking at right here, which is the help program, it used to be a lot longer in terms of lines. It compressed a whole bunch when we added the try pattern, but it's still like, it goes up to line 300 or something. And it really seems like we can also just yoink all this stuff out to factory functions or helper functions for setup. I think a shorter main is a nicer main. But then it becomes more about like, what kind of stuff do you want to do in main versus elsewhere? And I feel like in our case, like security crucial things, like these invariants, like setting up pledges and unveils, they're pretty good to do in main because it makes it crystal clear what the sort of sandbox constraints of the program are. Same thing with arguments parsing. So really like the sandboxing, arguments parsing, and then calling some separate init function. I think that might be a general outline for how this would be nicer. But that's a good question. I really need to think more about this because we have a lot of really long main files. Abhishek says, "Hey Andreas, what's the most common design pattern that you use in Serenity?" Design pattern. So in terms of like the classical design patterns from the design patterns book, I guess the two most common things that we use in Serenity are the singleton pattern, which is everywhere, and the flyweight pattern we use a whole bunch in the web engine and JavaScript engine. Wait, what am I doing? Why am I creating a shortcut? Design patterns. Design patterns. I don't remember what they all are. Well, probably the singleton is the single most commonly used design pattern in the codebase, I think. Let's see. Player234 says, "Hi, I'm from Brazil. I don't understand English, but good luck at SerenityOS." Well, thank you. And I guess you don't understand this, but I appreciate the message. Let's see. Breathor says, "Hello, could you give me a quick summary of how the porting system in Serenity works? I'm curious to know what the workflow would look like to get random applications working on it." Sure. So the porting system, if you want to, if you want to actually write a port, then the easiest thing to do is to just pick any one of these existing ports and just look into the file that describes the port. So if you want to look at the bash port, for example, really the package.sh is what we want to look at. And or maybe we can look at a simpler one. Let's look at NASM. I think that one is pretty simple. Yeah, so this is a really simple port. And most of the time, you don't have to do much more than this, plus a patch. So really, you just need to create a file that is called package.sh in a new directory that has the name of your port. You want to tell it the name of the port, the version, where to find it online. So where can you find a tarball? And then if it uses a autoconf configure script, then you can just set it up like this and you're done. And the thing that actually runs these is portinclude.h, which is in the parent directory here. So that's actually in ports. It's called .portinclude.sh, and this is sort of the ports system. It's all contained here in this shell script. The way it works is that we take your description file and then we use the cross compiler from the Serenity toolchain that you have and build a version of the port software using the Serenity cross compiler. So you end up with Serenity binaries linked with Serenity libraries. And then the port system also copies the result of installing the port. It sort of ends up copying that or installing that into the staging area for the disk image that we build. So If we try building this port right here, for example, the NASM port, then as you can see, it will download the tarball, then run the configure script, and then it will just do a plain make. And then, of course, you can override all of these things if the port you're doing has custom build steps. So if it's not just a ./configure make install type port, you can override the build steps or the configure steps. But in this case, it was just a plain configure make install type port. So here, the very last step, it does an install, and the install actually goes into the, as I said, the staging area for the disk image. So the next time you actually build an image with Ninja Image, then NASM will now be included in that image. So that's how they end up in the Serenity environment. But like if you have never done a port before, or like you just want to mess around and not actually create a port description file yet, just to see if you can get it working, what you want to do is usually just like run configure yourself manually and point it to the C or C++ compiler in the Serenity toolchain directory. So here we have NASM, of course, just to see that it worked. And oh, it's been a long time since I did this actually, but usually you do something like this. So you just point to your CC, which is your C compiler override for configure script. You point that to, let's see, so right here, GCC. Like you would do something like that. You can also set CXX to the C++ compiler. And then once you've done that, you can pick some port that you download and do ./configure. And I think you just, as long as you pass this as the host, so you would do something like that, it will be able to build a Serenity program for you, and then you can copy that in manually to Serenity and test that out before you write the port script. I do have a whole bunch of videos on this channel where I port different types of software, so you might find those enlightening. Let's see, I do have the, wait, oh here, yeah, porting software to SerenityOS is a playlist that Linus made me create. I'll link that here, porting software to SerenityOS. In those videos, you can see me just sort of using the toolchain to iterate and rebuild the same port continuously as I work through the errors and sort of figure out what patches are needed. If patches are needed, then you add them in the patches directory, and most ports, or all the ports that use autoconf, must patch config.sub, unless they happen to use a very recent version of autoconf, I guess, because we're now in the official release of autoconf. But yeah, so you just have to patch in Serenity into the list of systems that it knows how to detect, and you can copy. You can usually copy one of these out from, or no, you can't copy it out because it's specific to NASM in this case, but you can create this patch yourself pretty easily, and I'm sure that I do it in some of these videos. So. If you have more questions about porting software, you can come to the ports channel on Discord. There's a bunch of people there who are familiar with ports, and they make they've made many ports. So let's see. Leia Organa says, "What do you feel has been your biggest mistake in the SerenityOS project so far?" I don't know. I guess I don't really think of things as mistakes. I just think of them as like incremental steps towards wherever it is that we're going. And I don't know that we have, like everything that we did that we ended up having to change, it always taught us something, right? For example, early on, I had this strong ideas about UI design tools, and I thought I really wanted to sort of recapture the love I had for Visual Basic as a child, because I used to love making UIs in Visual Basic when I was a kid. But and I sort of made two visual form designers for Serenity, and I really enjoyed making them, but I did not enjoy using them because it's just an outdated, inflexible form of describing user interfaces. And what I really want to do is use layouts, programmatic layouts, and but it wasn't a mistake to implement those form designers, because if I hadn't done that, I think I would have still been believing that I wanted a Visual Basic style form designer. But by sort of going through the process of building it, trying to use it, trying to be productive with it, and then having to realize that it doesn't work, that was pretty productive. If you look at my current thinking, I guess the main thing that I'm starting to try to correct for now is our complete disregard for allocation failures in user space. Brian, who I interviewed a couple of days ago on the channel, he started the serious work of handling allocation failures in the kernel, and he's really made me change my mind about allocation failures in user space, and really got me thinking that it's something that we can start to handle properly and be more resilient in the face of low memory conditions. Because I've always been this kind of person who just says, you can just overcommit, or you can do a memory compressor, or you can swap out to whatever, and just pretend that there's more memory than there really is. And lately, I've really taken a liking to the idea of treating memory as an actually accountable resource, instead of as a pretend infinite resource that you just kind of give out and then hope that nobody uses more than we can handle. And I don't know that it's a mistake that we didn't take care of it in user space. It's more like the new way of thinking feels clearer and like an improvement upon what was previously a limitation of our thinking system. I don't know exactly how to say that, but I don't know what is the biggest mistake. I don't think we've made any particularly big mistakes, but we have made a lot of steps in the wrong direction that we then correct. Let's see. Big Smoke CIC says, I remember you mentioned in the CPP cast that you began by writing modules in user space, and then eventually you slapped a kernel underneath. How does writing an ELF executable loader in user space work, or any lower level system for that matter? So basically, what I started with was just, I guess it's probably still in the code base, actually. I mean, it should be here. If we go back to the beginning. Oh, wait, it's not the right place. If we look at the very first commit, so I think this had a wrapper binary or something that maybe I didn't include. But basically, what it was a simple Linux program that would just take an argument, and the argument was a .o file. So you would compile a program like, okay, let's recreate the scenario. So say that you make a simple test CPP that has something like, I don't know, like this, right? Return a plus b, and then you compile that. Okay, so now you have test.o. This is an unlinked elf object, and we can see here that it's a relocatable thing. So what I did then was I just got a description of the elf file format, and then I wrote a C++ program that would slurp in the file into memory by just memory mapping it, and then reading out the various parts of the data structures that make up the elf headers. So the very first thing you can do actually is implement something like readelf. So like readelf, I think -e test.o. So this command just prints out the elf header, and this is just like a C structure, right? That has a bunch of metadata about the elf, and once I had that, then I started to walk the symbol table, I think. So you can, wait, how do you do this again? That's the section table. Right, so next thing I did was like walk the symbol table, and then I wrote a function that looked for a specific symbol. So like it would find the symbol right here, figure out where in the file it was, and then set up a call, so you could actually call that function by calling to that address where it was mapped, and then I would call it with some arguments, and it would return the sum, if that makes sense. So it's a bit too much to like recreate here live, but I remember feeling when I got it working that like I had a C function in a .o file, and I was JIT linking it and calling it at runtime from my program. I thought that was pretty neat. I remember feeling like, wow, this is really neat. This is something I've never done before. It's very enjoyable. It took me a couple hours to get that working. Let's see. Oh, wait. Dang it. Missing so much stuff. Why do you think that is? ZR0 says, this chat proves that Andreas didn't just become a full-time OS developer, but also a full-time social worker. Well, I try. I try to I try to take everybody seriously and assume that the people have good intentions. So obviously, sometimes I do better at that, and sometimes I do worse, and I don't have unlimited patience. I don't think anybody does, but it's something I do try to do. Like I do try to, I try to remember the people who have been good to me when I've been confused, or when I didn't know something, or when I had the wrong idea about something, or when I was sort of abrasive about something. I try to remember all the people who treated me well in those scenarios, and I try to sort of take on the same energy that I once was treated with, and I hope I do a decent job of it. Let's see. David John says, did you take any inspiration from std expected or to implement error or t and other result types? Not really. We had error or for a long time. We just called it something else. So we had k result or in the kernel, and I think before that we had exception or in the web engine. So we've had this pattern for a very long time, and I'm not sure. I think expected came after, but the pattern, of course, is not something that we invented. It's just I think it comes. I don't know who came up with it first, but it's been like in many C++ libraries where I've seen it. Let's see. Ali says, notices design monster. Swedish knows what's up. Right, that's pretty funny. Design monster. Yeah, it's always interesting with people who don't have umlauted characters in their language, and they see this as design monster, whereas for me, I can't not see it as design monster. But now that you say it, I do see the the funniness. Let's see. RusDMV says, Andreas, you were mentioning your demo for a conference. I have a question. Where to find the recorded demo? I remember you talking about it and spending a reasonable amount of time to get prepared. Absolutely. So that went up on the Handmade Seattle website. This is the conference website, and I realize now that I'm quite far behind here, so I'm gonna have to catch up a bit. But yeah, so the demo I did for Handmade Seattle is here, so please check that out if you haven't seen it. Autom says, have you tried NeoVim? If so, what do you think about it? I think I'm using NeoVim, or NVim. Is that NeoVim? I don't know. Oh yeah, it is. It says right here, NeoVim. So I guess I'm using NeoVim every now and then. I used to be a exclusive Vim user, but nowadays I just use it to tweak text files here and there. I tend to use the C-line editor primarily. I don't have any strong opinions about NeoVim. I think I'm not using it in a way that even allows me to see the difference between NeoVim and classic Vim. So I don't really have an opinion worth hearing about NeoVim. It seems fine. Character X says, hey Andreas, I was thinking, is it worth it to create own version of things like string, URL parser, and builder, or use pre-existing libraries? What do you think about it? Depends on what your goals are and your design constraints and so on. Like what would be the reason to create your own string, URL parser, etc. In Serenity, we create our own things for two reasons. Number one, because it's a freestanding environment where there is nothing, so we have to create everything. And number two, because it is fun. If you are in a non-freestanding environment where you have access to libraries, and maybe you don't enjoy or you feel neutral about creating these things yourself, then I would recommend not doing it. Likewise, if you are at work and you're building something for your employer, I would recommend using pre-existing libraries most of the time. But of course, there are situations where you can benefit from creating something custom. It really depends on what you want to gain by building custom versions. Many people go into building custom versions of things thinking that it's going to give them a performance edge, and then they, and I've done this too many times, and then we discover that mature solutions tend to have already explored a large part of the sort of performance pathology space. And then you end up with a worse solution, with a less tested, worse solution that performs slower. But of course, it is possible to succeed. I don't know. We'd need to know more. Let's see. Saksham says, what do you do for your day job? And Coding Genesis correctly answers this. My day job is to work on SerenityOS. And yeah, that's basically it. My day job is to work on SerenityOS, to manage the SerenityOS community, to make content about SerenityOS, and try to move the project forward in a good direction. It keeps changing because ultimately I kind of decide what I want to do with it, but so far a lot of people seem to think I'm doing something good with it, so I get a fair bit of support, which I really appreciate because it is really awesome to be able to do this. And I have some ideas for awesomer things to do going forward, but we'll see what happens with those. Let's see. Radiant Mango says, could you explain the recent change passing all string view arguments by value instead of const? Sure. So basically, when you pass string view by value, let's just do it here in an example. So say that you have a function that looks like this. That's actually silly. There we go. What the compiler does here, because string view is a very simple type, if you look inside of it, it's almost all, or not all, but it's const expert, I think, to the point where you can use it in constant evaluated contexts, I think. So the compiler sees that this is a very simple type. It just has two primitive members right here. So a character pointer and a size, and nothing fancy going on. So it can really just expand that into what is effectively the same as this, right? So when it comes to the generated assembly code, this basically becomes this. And passing two things like this is, I think it's always more efficient and generates smaller and faster code than doing this in some cases. So what happens when you do this is that unless you have the benefit of inlining so the compiler can see everything that happens here, the caller of foo will have to put a pointer to this string view somewhere instead of just like spitting out the two members of it. So you get a step of indirection that you avoid with this type. And there's also the benefit of aliasing, I think. So in this case, the compiler knows when we're in foo. So when we're here, we know that the members of bar will not be magically changed by something else because it's a value copy. So we know we have I don't remember how to express this in C++. Standardese or whatever, but I think nobody can alias our value copy of this. Whereas here, somebody could potentially like change the contents of bar underneath us, and we would have to be cautious to notice those updates, if that makes sense. Let's see. Oh, Phil with the super chat. Thank you, Phil. Phil says, since going full-time on GCC Rust, I sometimes find it hard to stop working on my compiler. How do you manage your time while working on Serenity in terms of work-life balance? Ooh, that is that's a big question. So I don't know that I have great solutions for this, but lately what I've been doing, this is really something that I haven't figured out because I also find it hard to stop working on Serenity. Lately, I do try to force myself to play video games, to sort of not just to do something else, or not just to get away from the computer, but like to make time for something that I know I really like also, because I love playing video games. I've always loved it, but if I just go on autopilot, it's really easy for me to just sit and work on Serenity because I love that too. So I try to almost like force myself to start doing something else, and video games has been lately what I've been doing. So I just sort of in the evenings, I just drag myself to sit at the PlayStation and just play something. And I don't know that I'm doing super well in terms of work-life balance, because it feels almost like the work is so much fun that I don't mind right now working so much on it. But at the same time, that is probably a dangerous path, or a risky path at least. And I am conscious of the risk, right? So I am sort of trying to avoid going too hard, but I guess okay, so what I really do, I think, if I try to observe my own behavior, is what I do is I set up all of these things that are not working on Serenity and that I want to do, and then I force myself to do them. And it sounds weird to say that about things that I really enjoy and things I want to do. So those are things like playing video games, cooking like proper nice meals instead of just quick meals, going to the gym, talking to family members. And I have a hard time doing those things automatically when I'm really enjoying what I'm working on. So one thing I was doing for a while was I would schedule my meals in my calendar, but I actually stopped doing that a few days ago because I wasn't sticking to the schedule anyway. And I wish I had a better answer where I could tell you like, oh, this and that is what I do. But now I just have to observe myself in real time. I feel like today there's a lot of questions where I have to think more about it. This is a good one in that area as well. Thank you, Phil, for asking about this. I really have to think more about it. Let's see. Oh gosh, I'm so far behind. So Mustafa says, how do you handle low memory in C++? I always thought I can't handle those. And also, can I use the same plan for garbage collected language? So you can handle it in a couple of different ways. Typically in C++, what you can do, if you're using exceptions, then you can use, there's some standard allocation failure exception that you can use, which allows you to have like constructors that fail and things like that, which I personally find really weird. You can also handle it by explicitly checking after each allocation if it succeeded or not. The strategy that you would use for a garbage collected language is very different, because in a garbage collected language, you tend to not have control over when the garbage collector runs. Of course, I guess you could have a garbage collected language where all the GC invocations are explicit. But the ones I've used, at least like JavaScript, you kind of just allocate random things, often implicitly, and you don't even see the allocation happening. And then the way that you would handle an allocation failure in an environment like that is you would probably throw an exception for it. That's tricky though. And also, like in a garbage collected language, allocation failure is not always like completely, it doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't more memory. It just means that an allocation fails, but like maybe a garbage collection would free up a lot of memory. Although I suppose if an allocation fails, you would have the garbage collector run synchronously at that point. And if it still fails, then you throw an exception. So maybe that's not a concern. I don't know. I never actually tried to handle allocation failures in JavaScript. Low memory though, like, so if we're talking not about allocation failure, but about low memory, so the memory is getting low but not exhausted. On macOS and iOS, at least, which I'm familiar with, you get notifications from the system which tell you that like, oh, we're entering, we're sort of below this watermark level where you need to start being concerned and be a little conservative about what you allocate. And that's something that I would like to replicate as well for Serenity. Not exactly sure how that would look yet, but I think that would be a pretty cool thing to have. And in those cases, like you would just have some event that you listen for and sort of update your allocation and caching strategies and things like that in response to that event coming. Oh, hello, Martin. Good to see you. Is there somewhere pre-built images of Serenity are published frequently? No. So we don't publish any pre-built images for a couple of different reasons. The main reason being that it is not really a project meant for packaging and for like consumption of. It's a project by its own developers for its own developers, right? So we kind of expect everybody who wants to use it to also want to build it, and also it's just a nuisance to keep that kind of thing up to date because we are constantly changing the system. Like we see usually 10 plus changes every day, and things quickly get outdated. So, but I think maybe somebody is doing sort of unofficial images somewhere. I forget where, but maybe somebody on Discord knows. Martin says, I realize that SerenityOS is easy to build from source, but I have to have a project that consumes OS images to quickly create virtual machines. We've been getting requests to add SerenityOS. Right. So there isn't like an official source of those things. So I don't know what the best approach to that is. Let's see. Mr. Pickpick says, hello. How hard do you think it would be to tinker around on Serenity and copy/port in something smallish like the Lua interpreter? Oh, I think that was easy enough that somebody already did it, actually. Don't we have Lua? Yes, we have Lua. So I don't think that would be super hard because it was evidently doable. But I encourage you to tinker around yourself and see what you can do. That's usually the best thing to do, is to just doodle around. Mr. Pickwick says, for a beginner, that is. So I don't know how much of a beginner you are, but you can definitely do these kind of things. It just takes, like, the more of a beginner you are, the more of a struggle it will be, but you can still do it. And you can also, if you get stuck, you can ask on Discord in the ports channel. The people in the ports channel, they know how to get stuff ported usually, so they can definitely help you. Let's see, Coding Genesis says, I think it's great how you manage the project and more importantly, the community around it. Thanks a lot. Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. Oh, wait. Why am I so far behind today? So Harshit says, can I watch a YouTube video on Serenity? No, you cannot watch YouTube videos yet. We have been making some progress on YouTube. Much of it thanks to Luke, who is doing a lot of great work. But actually, I haven't looked at YouTube and Serenity for a while. It's definitely not to the point where you can even recognize it, but we load more of the page now than we had before. Oh, shoot. I think I just lost my camera. Let's see. Can I? All right. Let's just do that. My camera has died, but we will carry on. I'm still waiting for a battery pack for the camera where I can plug it into the wall. It's currently running on battery, which is not great. So let's see. What the heck was I even gonna do? Totally forgot. Oh, YouTube, right. YouTube.com. YouTube.com/com. Let's try to go to my YouTube page and see what that looks like. It crashed. Okay. So we have regressed a bit, it seems. Definitely have to investigate what that is. We used to load a little bit of the page, but the web these days, it keeps changing. You know, like you support one web page one day, and tomorrow they added a new framework that doesn't work on your engine. So it will take some looking into. Let's see. 3Creepio says, keep up the good work. Thank you, 3Creepio. Really appreciate that. I'm just checking down here that people see that, yes, camera is gone. Okay. Okay, so Philip says, thanks for the thoughtful reply. Your answer is fantastic. It's something we have to keep trying and doing our best. Yeah, I think so. I think with when it comes to work-life balance, when your work is really, really enjoyable, then there's this aspect of guilt almost, at least in my case, where I feel a bit like I'm enjoying my work so much that, like, who am I to ask for work-life balance? But obviously that's a silly and unproductive position that will just bite me in the ass down the road. So I do have to reject it. Yeah, it's something that we have to sort of continuously evaluate and get better at. Keep trying and doing our best, for sure. Let's see. Coding Genesis says, regarding the work-life balance question, do you sometimes work on SerenityOS and get so consumed by it that you forget time and spend way more hours coding than you wanted to? I don't know. Like, I definitely get consumed, but I don't spend more time programming than I want to, I think. Because when I'm programming, I really want to do programming. I usually manage to walk away. Like, I haven't had an issue where I do so much programming that I neglect something important. That hasn't happened for a long time. It's something that used to happen, for sure, but it's been a long time since. Let's see, Marco with the super chat. Thank you, Marco, very much. Saying, loved your Serenity Maine approach and all it represents regarding error propagation. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much, Marco. Yeah, I really enjoyed how the Serenity Maine thing is going, and it feels a bit like I almost have this feeling that we're in free fall with that whole approach, because it's new and unfamiliar, and I'm kind of upending something as fundamental as the main function and changing how we use that. But it also feels like a sane approach in principle. I think I just need to see it propagated more, and like the more I see it, the more confident I feel that it will be okay. Let's see. F Society says, there's a GitHub action error on the current build. Should I use a one-day-old version where this error doesn't exist? So we have GitHub action errors all the time because some of our tests are flaky, unfortunately, and it's usually fine to use the current build. It's pretty rare that the master branch is actually broken. Let's see. Aaron, I never thought about if it's Aaron or Aaron. I guess Aaron. Aaron says, I got a new CPU cooler to boost my Serenity builds. By the way, Andreas, you should look into self and small talk if you want to get inspired with garbage collection. Yeah, I probably should. I actually said earlier in the stream that I do want to look into small talk, for example. Miguel says he just built SerenityOS on his MacBook Air M1. It actually runs. That is sweet. Very sweet. Hope that the performance on the M1 is okay. I know that some of my friends worked on the Rosetta 2 engine for M1. Although if you're, I guess you're not running an emulated x86 binary, so that doesn't really make sense. Quindle says, what camera do you use that you have to run on battery only? It's Canon EOS M200, I think it's called. And yeah, it's battery only, but I have a battery pack. It's like, it might even be in the mail. I just didn't check, so I have to have to check. But yeah, it's battery only. But once I put in the battery pack, then it comes with sort of a battery emulator that you actually plug into the wall, and then it becomes a non-issue. It was like, I don't know, it was like a $10 solution. Luke says, I think it oomed. The YouTube homepage is a bit more recognizable. Yeah, it probably did oom. I didn't even think about that. It's been I've been taking a little break from working on the browser, so I forgot about all the usual stuff, like how things oom. We do need to look into memory consumption of the browser seriously at some point. I think there's a lot of stuff that we do which is extremely wasteful memory-wise, in especially in the CSS engine. Like we allocate a lot of the same properties over and over again due to CSS inheritance. I know that we're definitely eating huge allocation costs because of that. Okay, so what am I looking at here? This is the YouTube homepage. So I don't know if you can see these, but you can actually see sort of the outline, the gray outline of videos here. Like there's a little icon for the channel, I think, and then like the name of the video. But you can't actually see any text. So it needs a little bit of work, but it's a start. Let's see. Benjamin Phelps says, do you have any crypto addresses for donations? I don't have anything like that set up at the moment. I have, I'm quite apprehensive about those kind of things because the Swedish tax authorities are particularly harsh, let's say, about cryptocurrencies. And I don't want to create any more of a situation with the Swedish tax office than what I already have. But of course, if there's a situation where somebody wanted to donate a really large sum of money, and they would only be able to use cryptocurrencies, then of course please contact me and we'll figure something out. But I haven't set one up because of the let's say extremely detailed reporting requirements. And Benjamin with the super chat, thank you very much, Benjamin, asking if I like golf. I can't say that I have an opinion. The last time I swung a golf club, I think I was 12 years old, because I lived in the place where I grew up. We had this thing for kids where this was outside of school, but like once a week, I was a member of a thing where once a week we would try a new sport. So throughout the year, we would try like a new sport every week. And I remember this really well because it was really fun. Just like to get to know all the different sports that are available. And that's when I last played golf. So they took us to a driving range and we got to swing clubs and hit balls. And I think I hit the ball like 1 out of 8 times or something like that. I had a very hard time with it. So standard golf, I can't say that I like or dislike, but it didn't really stick to me back then. Putt-putt golf, on the other hand, or miniature golf, if you will, I am a big fan of. I really enjoy, but I also have to, let's say, be careful with putt-putt golf because I can get very salty if the ball doesn't go where I want it to go. That it has been a problem in the past. But yes, thank you for the super chat very much. Let's see. Breathor says, do you have any advice on how to escape the tutorial hell phase as a beginner programmer? I guess so, yes. It is to start working on something that is longer than like a screen full of text. So a very typical thing that keeps you in tutorial hell is that you keep making these small programs and you don't take on tasks that are big enough that they will grow into something more complicated. So I think if you are if you feel ready, you feel frustrated and ready to escape that phase, then what I would recommend is starting to build something a little bit more complicated, like something like a typical thing that people do might be a web server, for example, or a web client, like an HTTP client. But a web server is a really nice one that usually allows you to expand past just a single file with a couple of functions, or you can do like a simple game and then make like a slightly less simple game, things like that. But I think the main important thing is to start doing something where you don't just like finish it, but do something that will take some time to finish. So growing the scope of the things you attempt, really. Let's see. Benjamin says that he has more crypto than he does cash for larger one-off donations. Well, that's a very fortunate position to be in. I'm happy for you, Benjamin. Let's see. Anuj says he will donate 1 Bitcoin. Well, if you want to donate a Bitcoin, I will certainly set up an address. Let's see. Martin says he has the M200 and battery adapter. Works great. Yes, actually, the reason I picked up the M200 was because I saw Martin using it on Twitch. And I saw Martin's Twitch stream. Martin is I think the main developer of Ubuntu Mate, which is the distro I'm using. And he streams on Twitch sometimes. And his picture quality is just ridiculous. So I saw that and I said to myself, well, I want to have that picture quality. So I just got the same camera as he has, and it's great, except exactly this problem that we're having right now where it runs out of battery. Let's see. Miguel says QEMU is running under Rosetta. So I don't know if it runs under Rosetta. I would assume that it doesn't. I would assume, but I don't know actually what the architecture there is. Like I would assume that it runs the QEMU. QEMU has its own x86 emulation, right? Let's see. Coding Genesis says, to what extent, if any, and what do you have to write in assembly? So you mean like me specifically? How much assembly do I have to write in my daily life? Not much, but if you want to build an operating system, you do have to write a little bit of assembly because there are some things that you just can't express in C or C++. So a typical example is in a kernel where you enter the kernel from user space, you have to have sort of a software interrupt entry point where you do stuff like push every register to the stack and then call into C code in the kernel, right? There's no way to express these very low level operations in C. And likewise, the C compiler or C++ compiler does not expose primitives, even intrinsics, for system registers. So stuff like how the page tables are set up or how the interrupts are organized, all that stuff, there is no way to express that in C++. So you're forced to use assembly. Now you can use inline assembly or out-of-line assembly. That's up to you, but in order to do systems, like the lowest level of system programming, you have to use some assembly for that stuff. Let's see. Ricardo Vieira says, don't report them, presumably in reference to taxes. And that is certainly not an option. I am not interested in committing tax fraud. I do my best to be a good boy with my taxes, to the point where I actually have an accounting firm that does my taxes, because I don't want to screw it up. And it's like the way that I support myself is fairly unusual. So I want to make sure that everything is right and that I don't misreport something or something like that. Let's see. Mustafa says, what's your most controversial opinion on C++? I don't know. My most controversial opinion today on C++ is perhaps that I wish that C++ would steal the good features from new languages to come out faster. So, for example, the try pattern that I was going on about, right, that we're using here, this is really what we would really like to do, is having the nice feature from Rust where it just lets you do something like that instead. But it's not happening. And yes, I agree, it shouldn't be controversial. It seems very reasonable, but the reality is that these things are not happening nearly as fast as they do in other languages. And I wish that the language would move a bit faster and spend less time on the standard library. I feel sometimes that there's a disproportionate amount of focus on standard library functionality and standardization, and we end up with a core language that doesn't move fast, and then you see all these other languages get all these nice features while people are figuring out sort of how to add new containers to STL. And maybe it seems to be a controversial opinion since it's clearly in disagreement, but I mean disagreement with what's actually happening. Defer and question mark in C++. Yeah, right? That would be pretty cool. Let's see. Somebody asked what I think about NFTs. I think NFTs are a very sad thing. I have no opinion about, like, a lot of people are upset about the environmental concerns, but really what I see is just yet another way to scam uninformed or unsophisticated people out of large amounts of money. It's just yet another iteration of the GFT, which is the greater fool theory. And I think it is an unfortunate obsession that has currently corrupted a bunch of people around us that are clearly motivated by greed. And when greed motivates you to steal from your friends, then something isn't right. And I think that's essentially what it's about. Let's see, Ricardo says, you mentioned before you had worked with interns. What is expected on an intern to know or work? That is really depending on what kind of internship it is. In my case, the interns I've had, what I expected from them was to have basic C programming knowledge and just very basic command line familiarity. And then I was able to teach them the rest that they needed. But if somebody is unfamiliar with the command line, like they only ever use an IDE, it can be a bit frustrating to bring them up to speed. But it really, it depends on the internship, right? It depends on what the kind of thing is about. So I can only speak to my own personal experiences managing interns. But that's what I expected. Henry was asking, is Serenity built completely from scratch, or are there third-party open source components? It's completely from scratch. Miguel says, are donations taxed though? In practice, some are and most are and some aren't. It's complicated. It depends. I think in Sweden, there's this constant issue where if there's in any way that the donation could be construed as being in support of you performing some kind of work or task, then it's considered not a donation, but like a payment for something, even though there's no exchange of goods or services. The Swedish tax office is extremely liberal in their own favor with interpreting things as a sale of services. So I think strict donations are non-taxed in Sweden, but very few things are considered strict donations. Let's see. Character X says, and Zig has try keyword for that. Yeah, indeed. Let's see, Mate says, what do you think about porting Holy C compiler into SerenityOS? I think you should try it out and tell us how it goes. That would be an interesting project. F Society says, are there differences between Linux core utils and Serenity core utils? Yes, there are very many differences. So the Serenity core utils, if you want to call them that, are essentially, if we look at something like ln, whatever, like the thing that creates a link or a symlink, we support usually like a bare minimum set of options that POSIX has. And POSIX not only describes all the syscall APIs and C library APIs, but also the basic command line set of Unix, right? And actually, in this case, we support F and S. We are actually missing capital L, capital P. But usually the GNU core utils have a lot more options and various fancy extensions because they've been around for so long and they've added all kinds of conveniences. So we don't strive for direct compatibility with the GNU core utils because there isn't really a need to have that. But if something is super convenient in the GNU core utils, then obviously we wouldn't mind having the same functionality. But yes, there are very many big differences, and our goal is not to replicate GNU core utils, but to just implement the POSIX utilities. Let's see. 3Creepio says, yeah, we don't even try to deal with anything as donations in Sweden. Not worth it. Yeah, basically, right? It's just the tax office in Sweden is extremely diligent and extremely slow. But it seems to me that the easiest thing to do is to just accept that everything is a sale and of a service, and then just let them have their taxes. I would have to say, like, having lived in America and in Sweden, I don't mind paying taxes in Sweden nearly as much as I would mind in the US, because in Sweden you get a copious amount of things for your taxes, whereas in America you don't get a whole lot for your taxes. And in fact, if you are an immigrant in America like I was, you also pay Social Security, which is basically just not to your benefit at all as an immigrant. So you're just like, that money is just taken from you. Let's see, C Pascal says, if I'm not mistaken, SerenityOS is using the original ext2 file system format. Are you planning to create your own file system just for the journey, or maybe for performance if that is applicable? I don't have any particular plan of any kind for the future, for the present, or any such thing. I don't plan. If somebody wants to investigate that, then I would recommend maybe supporting a file system that exists instead of just making a new one. The general spirit of Serenity is to take ideas that are known to work well and just replicating them, stealing them, basically. Abhishek says, Andres, have you ever had a period in your life where you hated programming? I don't know that I had a period where I hated programming, but I had some periods when I didn't do a lot of it. And they were really depressive periods. Or actually, I had two periods. Once, when I was a teenager, I stopped programming because I thought that it was more important to drink, party, play guitar, and be cool. And then as an adult, I also had a time where I was in a very dark spiral with drug abuse and depression, when I didn't do programming or much of anything else either. And both of those were not good periods, and I'm glad that I got out of them on the other side. Mustafa says that his controversial opinion on C++ is that implicit non-const references are horrible. I like having to manually do amp var to know it might be modified. Sure. Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think that denoting which things are references would be nice. And it would be nice if it worked that way. It's interesting because there are so many like little things about C++ that you could clearly do slightly better with just a tweak. But it's also really hard to come up with ways to do them without breaking backwards compatibility. And that's always the sort of the elephant in the room with C++, is that whatever you try to do to the language, there's always the army of tens of thousands of people saying, bruh, backwards compatibility. And I guess it's always going to be like that. 3Creepio says, whereabouts in America did you live? I lived in San Francisco. Alex says, is libc statically or dynamically linked for user space programs? It is dynamically linked. Tommy Tomastini says, Swedish government institutions are really slow unless you owe them. Yes, that's generally true, although I'm currently in a situation where I owe a significant amount of money to the Swedish government, and they just are not responding to me. So, but I've already transferred all the money to their account, but they are not acknowledging that they have received it for over a year, which is really weird. But like, I'm already done with my part. I'm just waiting for them to respond. So that's a bit strange. Let's see. Michael Dela Cruz says, how long have you been working on this? I started working on the Serenity operating system in October of 2018, so it's been a bit over 3 years at this point. Simon says, I've been thinking of implementing sharpening filters in Pixel Paint. How do I start on that? So I would recommend looking at the existing filters and just seeing how they slot into the system. So if we bring up Pixel Paint, you can see we have a filter menu where we have a couple of different ones. So I think these are matrix-based filters, and actually we do have a sharpen filter already. So I guess what I would do if I were you is look at how the current sharpen filter is implemented, and if you want to add an alternative sharpen filter or refine the existing one, but basically go and look up how that one is implemented. And to do that, I suppose I would just recommend searching for sharpen in the code base, and then we quickly find the graphics sharpen filter class, which this is implemented a little strangely. I don't remember this. So it has no oh, so wait, so the parameters to the sharpen matrix are here. Okay, so that's a little bit strange. I guess I would have expected to see them in the sharpen filter declaration somehow. But yeah, so I recommend looking at how the current set of filters are implemented and taking it from there. Abhishek says, thank you for doing live streams. These help a lot in staying motivated as well as reigniting passion for programming. I hope I will start to love programming. I hope so too. And I would say that I think the thing that unlocks true love for programming is when you become good enough at it that you can be really productive without constantly having to pause and look things up, or like struggle with the compiler. Like once you get out of the stage where like you have the syntax down, like you know exactly how to type and you don't make syntax mistakes much anymore, that generally tends to be when you are able to access like that real love for programming, because now you get speed happening, and then you start to accelerate because you can go faster and faster. But of course, I don't know where you are in your programming skill development journey. But I hope that you will find something that makes you love it too. And it certainly happens to people that they lose the passion for programming, but I can tell you for sure that it's definitely possible to regain it. It has happened to me. I have, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, I've had this dark depressive period when I didn't do programming, and I was able to pick it up again, and I'm now having more fun than ever. So yeah, you can definitely do it. F Society says, nice, the core utils of Serenity do things that he would like the GNU core utils to do. For example, yes prints yes instead of y, which makes so much more sense. So I think actually that might be a violation of POSIX, but I'm not sure. Maybe POSIX doesn't actually have yes. Yeah, maybe it doesn't. So somebody mentioned at some point that the yes command, the GNU yes command prints y because there are some tools that ask y/n and they don't accept yes, like literally yes as an input. You have to tell it y. So it might be that we have to change our output to y if we want to support such programs, but I'm not sure. Oh, Kenneth with the super chat. Thank you, Kenneth, saying, have a great weekend, Andreas. Thanks for the videos and the sharing of thoughts and knowledge. Thank you very much, Kenneth, for the super chat. And didn't I review your patch just yesterday? Yeah. So Kenneth is one of the people who is helping out with porting things to the new main function signature. So thank you very much, Kenneth, for working on that. I really appreciate that when sort of new patterns emerge in the code base, then it's not just me who has to go and apply the pattern, but like there's all these people who want to help out, which is really awesome. So super appreciate that. And the super chat, thank you, Kenneth. And I hope you have a great weekend too. Let's back up a little bit here. What did I miss? Christian says, hi Andreas, what color scheme / theme are you using in C-Line? I very much enjoy how the code looks in such a color scheme. I always forget what this one is called, so let's just look it up. Where are the settings? Right here. Color scheme, one dark vivid is the one I'm using. And I think maybe I picked that up in the plugins area or something. Yeah, one dark theme. I got it in it's like a downloadable plugin. So it's right here inside of the plugin store or whatever, but it's a free plugin. That's the one I'm using. Let's see. Mustafa says, I don't know if I get the fuzz about backwards compatibility. Why can't the people who want it just use older versions of a compiler? Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of reasons and big arguments about backwards compatibility. Usually what happens is like people want some new feature in the language, but they just want the new feature. They don't want to change anything that else about their code. So say that like a new standard comes out and it adds a great feature, but in order to use that feature, you have to also like accept that now you're also using these 20 other new features, and some of which are not backwards compatible. Then like people would be upset about that, I suppose. Quarktashe. Okay, that's an interesting name. Hey Andreas, love your work. I recently filed a bug report on browser, but then felt a bit stupid because I could have filed literally 10 more. Are bug reports for things like browser even appreciated? So bug reports are generally appreciated, but when it comes to something like browser, it's a very immature browser engine, right? So it has endless numbers of bugs. So it's not always super useful to have bug reports that just say like, oh, this page doesn't work, but it can be useful if you have like opening this URL crashes, say. So you have some URL, you open it, it crashes every time. That's generally a useful bug report because it's like reproducible. You can easily go and investigate based on that. Likewise, if you have like a piece of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, that like a file that you open that file in browser, it crashes, that's also extremely useful. That's actually even more useful because then you don't have to deal with the networking stack. So bugs are useful, but if it's just like, oh, this page doesn't look right, or this page doesn't work correctly, that's less useful because we already know that a lot of standard support is missing. So it's not a surprise that things like YouTube doesn't work correctly. So we don't need a bug that says YouTube doesn't work correctly, right? Well, now it's kind of again, I guess, because so many things don't work correctly. As the engine becomes more mature and more and more sites do start to work, then bug reports such as like, oh, this site doesn't look right, there will come a time when that bug report makes sense, but today it doesn't really make sense. Satyam says, I want to develop my own operating system. What should be my starting point? You can start literally anywhere. Just my recommendation is to start with the part of an operating system that you find the most interesting. David says, I honestly still being amazed how fast you were able to build a desktop, audio server, browser, and all that stuff so quickly, which Linux still hasn't done correctly. Congrats to that. So we certainly brought up Serenity pretty fast, but it's also like very rough in many parts. It has many rough edges. We've taken many shortcuts. And what we've built is really, like the first thing that I built was really like a vertical slice of the system. And now we are in a state of like filling in all those vertical layers. And I think some people get the idea that like Serenity is really mature because it looks nice and it behaves well in many cases, but like there are many rough edges, right? If you actually use the system, you try to do something with it, you start to notice these rough edges. So there's a lot of work to do, but I am happy with the rate of progress that we've seen. Excuse me. Vesna says, I wanted to say that if you're not fully aware of your virtues, that you have a good soul, smart, don't like too much materialism, and flaws, which we all have, what is the point? What is the point? Not sure I understand the question. If you're not fully aware of your virtues and flaws, what is the point? I think you're right that it's a good thing to try to make yourself aware of your virtues and your flaws much more so than your virtues. But yeah, what is the point if you're not pursuing awareness of your virtues and flaws? I guess the counter question to that is, once you figure out what your virtues and flaws are, what is the point then? Like there has to exist a life outside of just a philosophical pursuit of introspection, right? But I don't know exactly. I don't know exactly what you're getting at with the question, so I don't think I'm answering it super well. Sachem says, please tell me I want to use my name and picture when OS starts. All right, so start by building a login screen for your system, if that's the thing that you're the most interested in. I think like the way I always try to motivate people is to tell them, just start with the thing that interests you. And then you can build, once you build that, then you build the layers around that, and then you build the layers around those layers, or like the thing that goes under that, the thing that goes under that, and so on. David says, I mean, Linux on desktop sucks because of its large fragmentation of tools like ALSA, Pulse Audio, Pipewire, GTK, Qt, and so on. So the fragmentation of desktop Linux is definitely something that we are consciously avoiding in Serenity by saying, like, there is one way of doing a GUI on Serenity. You just use libGUI, right? And yeah, I mean, I've been using Linux for very many years, so I'm very familiar with these issues, and I agree that the fragmentation just is a huge source of experience degradation on Linux, and like the Linux desktop could be something very different if they hadn't been so fragmented. But I think the fragmentation itself is sort of just a side effect of the development model. And when you have a fragmented development model, you end up with fragmented tools. And that's just how that world works. It's just inherently fragmented, and I don't know that you can patch that up in any way. If you look at the most successful in terms of market penetration, like the most successful Linux project or projects, things like Ubuntu, right? The things that make them successful, from my perspective, is that they just take control of the desktop experience that they want to produce, and then they like decide on a single set of technologies that they're going to use in their experience, and then like try to make those as good as possible, and then you end up with a highly polished desktop compared to others. So yeah, that's I don't disagree with you. I wouldn't say that it sucks, but I would say that it's definitely suffers from the fragmentation. Luparia says, off-topic question, what music do you listen to in general? So I listen to a lot of different music, constantly new stuff. So just yesterday, I got a YouTube recommendation because the YouTube algorithm is trying to radicalize me into country music, it seems like. So I started listening to Zach Bryan, which is some guy who sings country songs. And they recommended this video to me, Heading South. It's just a sweaty man sitting and playing the guitar, and I thought, wow, this is really nice. And then I ended up listening to like 20 other of his songs. And I also, I'm just gonna link that. Shout outs to Zach Bryan. And I also listened to Rez, which I recently discovered, which I thought was really cool and very intense music. And I tend to find a lot of things to recommendations, like algorithmic recommendations. So Zach Bryan I found via YouTube recommendation, and Rez I found via Spotify recommendation. And these are just things I listen to right now. In general, I have a very eclectic music taste. And I also listen to a lot of metal music because I am Swedish, so it comes with the package. Like Gothenburg metal in particular, because I grew up close to Gothenburg. Let's see. Character X says, if the standard removes all old/legacy code features and just left new modern features and add a little bit of memory safety, no any other languages will come close to C++ and dare to replace it. Right, but then you won't have C++ anymore, I guess, would be the counter argument. Piotr says, hello, Andreas. Question about recent try syntax. Do you want every function to return error or T in the end? Isn't using exceptions a more elegant solution? No, I don't want every function to return error or T, only the ones that have an error. Using exceptions, I would say, is not more elegant because it obscures the where the error is raised, and it also exceptions include implicit allocations and implicit unwind logic and a bunch of magic that I feel is detrimental to code readability. So value-based exceptions is my preference, and it seems to be the preference of every new language that is designed today. I haven't seen a new language use old style exceptions in many years. Let's see. Vincent says Linux is just a kernel. Well, that is correct. Thank you, Mr. Actually. Country unsubbed. Yeah. I think it's good to be willing to accept new types of music. I never listened to country really before in my life, so I had no familiarity with it. I guess I had the same types of prejudice that everybody has about country, that is just about, trucks and dirt roads and cold beers and whatever, but it wasn't like that at all, at least not this guy, so I thought it was a really nice surprise. Let's see. Mustafa says, favorite English movie. Oh, my favorite English. I think my favorite movie is called Pump Up the Volume. It is I think 1991 movie or something like that. 1990. It's about a kid in high school who has his own pirate radio station. So he's a very shy boy, but at night he speaks his mind to his classmates via his pirate radio station. They don't know that it's him, and He's just he's a cool guy on the radio, but a wimp in real life. And this was before like mainstream internet access. So I guess the equivalent today would be like somebody who's cool online, but back then, like this was what they had to work with, and it really resonated with me when I was a kid, because I felt a lot like that when I got access to the internet. That on the internet I could express myself and like speak freely, but in person I struggled to do that. And I thought it was a very cool movie about that concept. Yes, that would be my favorite. Let's see. Vinton says, go research GNOME KDE XFC development and choose the one you think should be dominant user space desktop application for Unix-like kernels and supported. I don't know why you're telling people to do this. Like, everybody already understands this. I think it's not really productive to correct people and like, yes, everybody knows that Linux is a kernel. Everybody understands that the desktop and the distro is not part of the Linux kernel. This argument has been made a million times. And there is a huge fragmentation issue in the free desktop world. So I'm going to have to agree with Jagger and I use Arch and say, okay. Anyway. Knut Bluetooth said that year of the Linux desktop for me was 1997. So 1997, I wonder if that was the first year I used Linux on the desktop. I don't remember exactly if it was 97 or 98, but I remember using KDE 1.0 whenever that came out, and 1998. Okay, yeah, so it must have been 98. And I built it from source, and I was 13 years old, I guess, at the time, and it was difficult. Like we downloaded these tarballs over a modem and put them on Slackware, and I didn't understand what I was doing, and I was trying to build KDE 1 from source on Slackware. And it was a journey. And we eventually got it up and running, although the desktop was pretty broken. So I would say 98 was maybe the year of the Linux desktop for me. Anyways, we are running out of time here, so let's wrap it up. I also installed Slackware from floppy disks, by the way. So yeah, this will be the end of office hours. And I just want to thank everybody for coming, for all the great questions, and for all the super chats. And I will not do a freestyle today. But if you enjoy freestyling, I have certainly been enjoying this guy, Harry Mack, recently. That guy is just, he's really good at freestyles. And I don't know. Oh, damn it. I assume everybody has seen it by now, but I'm just going to recommend it anyway because the guy is so freaking good. Like, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous how good he is at freestyling. I recommend checking that out. Yes, I agree. I use Arch. I love that guy. He's just great. So check that out. And actually, that's usually what I do after office hours is I go and I check the latest Harry Mack uploads, because he usually uploads right after office hours. So thank you everybody for coming, and I will see you all next time. I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you for coming.